Hello friends, this video on diversity in living organisms part 7 is brought to you by examfear.com. No more fear from exam. My discussion on classification, and I'll start with each of the kingdoms of the 5 kingdom classification. So first we will start discussing monera. So let us look at the kingdom monera. So these were one of the oldest life forms. As I said, as we go ahead with the kingdoms, we start with monera, then we go to protista, then fungi, then plantae, and then animalia. As we go ahead with the kingdom, we will see that we are coming to more and more recent life forms. So when I start with monera, I am actually talking about the oldest life forms. So that time the human beings were not there, the animals, the plants, nothing were there. So these are one of the oldest life forms. So from these monera, the other kingdoms actually arose. The other life forms actually evolved from this kingdom. They were prokaryotes, that is, no defined cell organelles or nucleus. So how is it? It is like the genetic material is loose in the cell. So you can see here. So here it is like everything is scattered here. So inside this you have the nucleoid, that is the DNA material. So it is not inside some specific membrane bound organelle, which is there in case of eukaryotes, right? We have already spoken about these different cell organelles in our lesson on cell. So these moneras were all prokaryotes. So everything was scattered inside them. Unicellular, that is made up of one cell. Unicellular, uni means one, cellular means cell. So it is made up of one cell. So just one cell will perform all the functions. Some are autotrophic while others are heterotrophic. Now what is autotrophic and what is heterotrophic? Autotrophic means those who prepare their own food. So they can prepare their own food by some method. Heterotrophic means they depend on others for their food. Maybe they depend on the autotrophs for their food. So the term auto means self. So autotrophic means those who can prepare their food by themselves. Heterotrophic, that means hetero means different. So that means those who depend on different animals for their food. So now in monera, some of the monerans are autotrophic. That is, they can prepare their own food, while there are some monera which are heterotrophic. So what all living organisms fall under this kingdom monera? So this kingdom monera mostly consists of the bacteria. So the bacteria falls under the kingdom monera. So when I talk of some autotrophic bacteria, so I am talking about cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria is an example of autotrophic bacteria. So if you want an example for autotrophic, it is cyanobacteria, because in bacteria also we have many different types of bacteria, right? Many different forms of bacteria. There are many bacteria as well, in fact. So cyanobacteria is an example of an autotrophic bacteria who can prepare their own food. When I talk of heterotrophic bacteria, you can take the example of E. coli. E. coli is a bacteria which is famous for causing infection in human stomach. Sometimes you will see that people suffer from stomach infection where they have pain in stomach, they have vomiting sensation and things like that. So it generally happens because of this bacteria E. coli, which resides in the intestine. Right? So this E. coli is a heterotrophic bacteria. So when it is present in the intestine, it actually steals some food from inside our body, because it cannot prepare its own food. So it stays in it lives in our intestine and takes some portion from our food itself. So this is an example of heterotrophic bacteria. So from this slide you can see that what were the basic characteristics based on which this classification was done. The cell structure, correct? The mode of nutrition and the body organization. So in this case, what do we get to know about the cell structure? We got to see that it is made up of only one cell, and these are prokaryotes. That means that inside that one cell there are no specific cell organelles. The genetic material is loose in the cell. So that was all about its cell structure. So the next was body organization. For body organization, again, since it is made up of just one cell, so there is no question of forming tissues or organs system. So the cell organization or body organization will actually take place when it is made up of more than one cell, because one cell is just one cell, so it cannot make tissues, right? When you have more cells, only then they can combine together to form tissues. So that was its body organization. Now when you talk about nutrition, what is the mode of nutrition? Some are autotrophic, some are heterotrophic, right? So these were the main characteristics of the monera kingdom. Now we will talk about these three characteristics for each of the kingdom. When we talk about each of the 5 kingdoms separately, I will specify about these 3 things. So you will see that these 3 characteristics differ in all the 5 kingdoms, and these 3 characteristics are true for all the members who belong to that particular kingdom. That means whatever life forms comes under monera, they are all prokaryotes, they are all unicellular, all of their mode of nutrition is either autotrophic or heterotrophic. Clear? Okay. So now let us look at the examples of monera. So bacteria. So here you can see bacteria. We all know that bacteria comes in many different shapes and sizes. We have bacteria of cylindrical shape. We have spherical shaped bacteria. So there are various different forms of shapes and sizes of bacteria. So they appear in a variety of shapes and sizes. As you can see in this picture, you have cylindrical one, you have somewhat which is shaped like a worm, you have spherical, you have little flattened shape of bacteria. So many varieties are available. They inhabit soil, water, radioactive waste, and the deep portions of Earth's crust. So where mostly do we find bacteria? They are present inside the soil. That is one of the most common habitat for bacteria. They are also present in water, radioactive waste. So the waste products, generally in the wastes and all, you tend to see bacteria growing, and the deep portions of Earth's crust. So even inside the earth crust, you have a lot of bacteria. So not only these, sometimes bacteria even stay inside the body of some other organism. The best example is the human beings. Inside our body also the bacteria resides, and sometimes they cause some problems also. They cause some diseases as well, right? Okay. So they also live in plant or animal bodies. Very true. So not only the way it causes diseases inside our body, similarly it also causes several diseases in plants. But that does not necessarily mean that if a bacteria is present inside our body, it is definite to cause some disease. That is not necessary. But sometimes they cause disease. So this is called symbiosis. What is symbiosis? It is a relationship of mutual benefit between 2 organisms. So sometimes it happens that bacteria resides inside the body of an animal or a plant, but it may harm that plant or animal, it may not harm that plant or animal, it may do some benefit to the plant or animal, right? So this kind of relationship is known as symbiosis. That is a relationship of mutual benefit. That means not only the bacteria is getting benefited from that organism, the organism is also getting benefited due to the presence of the bacteria. So sometimes the bacteria is also associated with some plant bodies or animal bodies in a symbiotic relationship, where the bacteria as well as the living organism both are getting benefited mutually. Right? So we will discuss about symbiosis in detail in one of our later slides. So for now, you should just get some idea about the places where we can actually see bacteria. Right? Okay. So now let us talk about some of the examples of bacteria in a little more detail. So let us first talk about cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria, the most commonly heard name in the monera kingdom. Why so? Because these cyanobacteria are considered to be the ancestor of all life forms. So many people believe that cyanobacteria were the one which were formed the first on this earth, and everything else evolved from cyanobacteria. Okay, so from where did this bacteria get the name cyanobacteria? The cyanobacteria is nothing but it is a blue-green algae. So when I talk about algae, what comes to your mind? The green colored brass-like thing which you see on the surface of water. Mainly you would have seen it on the ponds and all, the small water bodies. So that is what you get in your mind whenever we talk of algae. But friends, algae is not always green in color. There are many varieties of algae which are available. We can see red algae, we can see brown algae, we can see blue-green algae, we can see green algae. So there are many different varieties of algae, and all of them differ from each other in many ways. In fact, you will be surprised to know that these different types of algae falls under different kingdoms. So only the blue-green algae falls under the monera kingdom, whereas the green algae falls under the plantae kingdom, whereas the red algae and the brown algae, they again fall under a different kingdom. Right? So they are not actually, even though they are all algae, but they do not share the same basic characteristics. So in monera, we are talking about the blue-green algae. So these blue-green algae are also known as cyanobacteria. Why so? Because the word cyano, this word cyana actually means blue. So because of the color of these algae, they are known as cyanobacteria. Cyano means blue, hence termed as cyanobacteria. Right? So you can see the color of these algae here, right? Sometimes it looks like blue, sometimes it looks like green. They perform photosynthesis, as I told you in one of the previous slides, that cyanobacteria is an example of autotrophic monera. Right? Autotrophic means they can prepare their own food. Now, how do they prepare their own food? By the process of photosynthesis. What is photosynthesis? It is a process in which, in presence of sunlight, the organisms can prepare their food and store it in them. So for that, what is very much needed for performing photosynthesis? You should have that particular organism should have a pigment called chlorophyll, and due to the presence of this pigment chlorophyll, that organism appears green. For example, the plants all the plants which we see around us, most of the plants which appear green in color, they appear green due to the presence of the green colored pigment called chlorophyll, and all green plants can perform photosynthesis because they have chlorophyll. So in presence of sunlight, they can prepare their food. So these cyanobacteria also, they are green in color, they contain chlorophyll, and they can perform photosynthesis, and that is why they are autotrophic. Responsible for enriching atmosphere with oxygen. This was one of the very important contribution of these cyanobacteria on this earth. As I said, these cyanobacteria were one of the oldest life forms. In fact, they are actually considered to be the ancestor. So now when Earth was created, do you know why were there no life forms on Earth? That's because there was no oxygen on Earth. And every life form, in order to survive, they need oxygen, right? So these cyanobacteria were actually responsible to bring oxygen into the atmosphere. So today we have almost 21% of oxygen in our atmosphere. So that oxygen came into the atmosphere because of this cyanobacteria. So how did cyanobacteria bring this oxygen into the atmosphere? That's in this way. The cyanobacteria performed photosynthesis. For photosynthesis, what did they do? There was a chemical reaction which was taking place inside the cyanobacteria, where in presence of sunlight, carbon dioxide and water will combine together to form glucose, which was kept in the form of food for the cyanobacteria, and along with glucose, oxygen was released. So oxygen was one of the byproducts of the process of photosynthesis, and that is how oxygen started coming up in the atmosphere. So now the atmosphere got enriched with oxygen, and due to the presence of oxygen in the atmosphere, Earth became a suitable place for living organisms to be present, right? So you understand the concept? These cyanobacteria, when they came into picture, there was not much oxygen on Earth. So they started performing photosynthesis to prepare their own food, and meanwhile, during the process of photosynthesis, along with their food, which was prepared in the form of glucose, along with glucose, oxygen was also produced. So this oxygen started adding up in the atmosphere, and that is how the cyanobacteria actually enriched the atmosphere with oxygen. They are considered ancestors of life forms on Earth. Very true. Now, because of this reason, the statement became quite convincing that since they were the one who enriched the atmosphere with oxygen, so we can say that they were the ancestors. So since there was no oxygen that time, that means there were no life forms as well. So they were like the ancestors of all other life forms on Earth. Right? Okay, so blue-green algae or cyanobacteria, they are autotrophs. They are considered as the ancestors, and they enrich the atmosphere with oxygen. Okay, let us take another example of monera. Let us take the example of the bacteria Mycoplasma. So what is this Mycoplasma? Generally, Mycoplasma is a parasitic bacteria. What do I mean by parasitic bacteria? That means this is a heterotrophic bacteria. Heterotrophic, that means it depends on others for its own food. It cannot prepare its own food. And even under heterotrophic, there are many ways by which one can depend on others for its food. So under heterotrophic also we have many different categories. For example, there are some organisms which depend on dead and decomposed matter for their food. They are known as saprotrophic. There are other organisms which live inside the body of some other organism and get food from there. They are known as parasitic. So parasitic, we have already spoken about the term parasite while we were studying the lesson Why Do We Fall Ill? Right? So parasitic bacteria are those bacteria which lives inside the body of some other living organism, receives its food from that organism, and also cause diseases to that organism. So those kind of bacteria are known as parasitic bacteria. So where are they found? They are found in blood smears. So even inside the body of human beings, in the blood streams, they can be found. They can cause disease like FIA, which is feline infectious anemia. So this is a kind of disease where the patient tend to be anemic. Anemic means the level of hemoglobin in the blood decreases. The patient can have fever. They can feel some pain. So these are some of the symptoms of FIA, that is feline infectious anemia. So this is another example of a monera, that is a bacteria. Most of the bacteria fall under the kingdom monera. So I am just talking about one or two important bacteria, right? Okay. Next, let us talk about E. coli. E. coli is another popular bacteria. As I said, it is mostly popular to cause infection in the intestines. So these are rod-shaped bacteria, as you can see here in the picture. They are cylindrical in shape. They are rod-shaped bacteria found in lower intestine of warm-blooded animals. So now you might be wondering, what is this warm-blooded animals? Now we can categorize animals into two types depending upon their body temperature. One is warm-blooded and one is cold-blooded. So let me explain you what are warm-blooded animals, because that will anyways help you in the long run. So we have two categories of animals. One is warm-blooded and the other one is cold-blooded. So what are warm-blooded animals and what are cold-blooded animals? Warm-blooded animals are those who try to maintain the inside of their bodies at a constant temperature. The best example is human beings. Humans are an example. That means each and every human being wants that the temperature inside our body should remain constant, more or less. For example, when it is too hot, what do? We start sweating, right? We do not sweat purposely, but our body system and the body mechanism is such that we start sweating. So what happens when we start sweating? When we start sweating, by releasing water from our body, we tend to keep our body cool, because when you have water on your bodies, it will try to lower down your body temperature. So even though you are in a very hot atmosphere, even though the outside temperature is very hot, you at least control the temperature inside your body to remain the same. You do not allow that inside temperature of your body also to increase. Similarly, when you go to a very cold climate, the outside temperature is very cold. Do you think that the temperature inside our body also becomes very cold? It is not like that. The normal body temperature always remains around 98 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So even when the outside temperature is very cold, what do? If the temperature is so cold, if it is freezing outside, the normal tendency should be that the inside temperature should also become cold. But it doesn't happen like that, because the body mechanism is such that we start wearing woolen clothes and things like that, and the body will keep generating some heat inside to maintain the same temperature. So warm-blooded animals are those animals who will always try to maintain a constant temperature inside their body irrespective of the external temperature. Whereas cold-blooded animals are those whose body temperature changes with the temperature of the outside. For example, if those organisms go to a cold climate, their body temperature becomes very less. If they go to a warm climate, their body temperature increases. So they are known as cold-blooded animals, right? So now you understand what are warm-blooded and what are cold-blooded. So now these E. coli, they are found in the intestine of warm-blooded animals. That means those animals which tend to keep their body temperature constant. So examples of such animals are human beings, birds, most of the mammals in fact. So birds, human beings, rat, cat, they are all examples of warm-blooded animals. When I talk of cold-blooded animals who take the temperature of the surroundings, you can have examples of the reptiles like the lizards or the other kind of insects or the insects. They are all cold-blooded animals, right? Now, how do we maintain our body temperature? In order to maintain our body temperature also, the body needs some energy. And how do we get that energy? From the food which we eat. Right? Okay. So, this E. coli, most of the E. coli strains are harmless, but some can cause serious food poisoning in humans. As I said, it doesn't mean that if a bacteria dwells inside the body of an organism, it is for sure going to cause a disease and kill that organism. It is not like that. It is not that every time they are harmful. Only some of them are harmful, and that too not always, sometimes. So similarly, this E. coli, even in E. coli also, you have many different categories of E. coli. So when I say most E. coli strains, what do I mean by strains? I am talking about the varieties. So even in E. coli, we have many different varieties of E. coli. As I said, as I was talking about the different varieties in case of a mango. When I talk of a mango, in mango also we have several varieties, right? So similarly, when I talk of any organism, there are many different varieties of that same organism. So for E. coli also we have many different varieties. Some of them are not at all harmful, but some of them can cause serious food poisoning in humans. Thank you. Please visit www.examfear.com to watch more videos, attempt free online test, get free study material, find tutors and mentors. Thank you once again.